This is Comic Geek Speak episode 1913, Comic Talk and a conversation with Sean Chen. Welcome to the show. I'm Adam Murdo.
I'm Ian Levestein.
And I'm Chris Eberly.
All right. Welcome on one and all to the show. For another Comic Talk episode, we were going to be joined by Shane. He unfortunately is feeling a little bit under the weather tonight, so we will soldier on without him. And as you heard in the wonderful intro there by Mr. Murdo, we are also joined this episode by longtime comic book creator and artist, Sean Chen. Sean, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good. I mean, I guess you could have said writer too, because I kind of got that in my curriculum vitae just this year. So
there you go. Writer, creator, artist, all around industry veteran, Sean Chen. How about that? I think that probably covers every single base.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, we're going to talk about Sean's latest work and then meander into a couple other of his career points as the episode rolls on here. And we will get to that shortly. But of course, a reminder that you at patreon.com/comicgeekspeak help to make these episodes happen. And we thank you so much for that continued support of the show. For as little as $1 a month, you can support the show and keep it a-rolling. And we thank you so much for any support that you give. If you can't donate monetarily, then please feel free to send us a review or just let us know what you thought about an episode. That matters just as much as anything else. And we thank you so much for that at, once again, patreon.com/comicgeekspeak. So, Sean, we have a tradition here on the show when we have a new guest on. And it started off very, very broadly and try to get your origins a little bit. How did you first get into comic books as a kid?
Well, as a kid, I mean, I guess my story is probably really different than most people. I never really read comics growing up. And it's not because I didn't want to. It's really because my parents didn't really allow them in the house. So I just was never really exposed to them. But I like all. And then you can get exposed to superheroes through other means. So there was always, while comics weren't allowed, we get the Washington Post newspaper. And every day there's like a Spider-Man comic in there. And that was my favorite. And then on Sunday, you get the colored version of it, the longer form story. And then on the Electric Company, that Spider-Man was on there. And then on Saturday morning, you can watch the Super Friends. So I love superheroes, and I never really read the comics. So I took a lot of art classes, and I was pretty much classically trained as an artist. And then pretty soon kind of grew out of that superhero type of look, because, if you're like a classically trained artist, it looks strange when you look at like Kirby or Buscema work, because it's very stylized for comics. And it was kind of a turnoff because it looks like to me it kind of looked amateurish, because it didn't look like the figure drawings I was doing in fine art. But then I discovered Heavy Metal magazine, because you can go to the mall and go to the Borders books, and they have that magazine rack, and right next to the where the magazines have that black plastic lucite cover because the penthouse is underneath. Right nearby there is Heavy Metal magazine. So I actually found Heavy Metal magazine easier to get than a comic book. And when I looked at inside there, that stuff blew my mind, because they drew in a different way. It wasn't the American superhero stuff. Mm-hmm. It was like Mobius and they were all kind of drawn very realistically and naturally. And then the coloring wasn't the 4-color coloring process that kind of flattens everything. It's like watercolor. So it's like painting. Right. And that really blew my mind. I thought, like, I have to do this. And, in this country where you apply that type of trade is in the from Marvel or DC. So I was getting samples together. and then brought them around to the local conventions. And a lot of the artists and editors will really acknowledge, like, well, this guy knows how to draw, but that whole dynamic thing was kind of missing. So that came later on when I kind of hung out with David Mazzucchelli, and yeah, he liked the drawings that I did, and I tried to approximate the superhero stuff, but just something was missing. And he was really good at kind of over the years just kind of tutoring me and kind of mentoring me to get better at doing it. And then that's when I finally went to San Diego Comic-Con with a portfolio. And I sat next to David Mazzucchelli, just talking to him. And then someone from Valiant came by, and they kind of, they were trying to hire David to do a Valiant comic. But he says, oh, I'm not in that business anymore, but this guy is pretty good. So the publisher brought me over to Valiant. And then they brought me into a meeting with Barry Windsor-Smith. And that was very kind of fortuitous because, I had trouble with the American kind of the dynamic superhero stuff that was like very Kirby. But then Barry Windsor-Smith was kind of like there was a bridge there because he had that style that was very European. And when I saw him, I was like, that's the guy I wanted to be. That's the guy I want to draw like. And then that started that was my into the business. It was through Valiant.
It's funny. I think every single name that you just said is our creators and artists that we're all fans of. And frankly, like it's funny how, having the right friend at the right time is sometimes the best way to get into a business. And to know somebody like David Mazzucchelli in general, not to mention to be at the right place at the right time like that with Valiant. I mean, that's fantastic, man. Like what a way to get into it.
Yeah, I have to say, like, looking back at it, I'm kind of struck at how, because anyway, I was there when it all unfolded, obviously, but then looking back at it, I was wondering how all of these chance meetings, I mean, there's supposedly chance meetings, which just happened all at the right time, and I got in at the right time. There's a third name to throw in that mix, and it probably was the most important mentor, and that was Bob Layton, because when I got to Valiant, he was the one that spent the most time with me, because Barry lived upstate, and he would come by once in a while. But Bob Layton was there all the time, and he was the person that he really knew the storytelling for that bombastic, dynamic American superhero comics more than anyone. And he really laid into me and showed me how to do that and got me up to speed. So he was exactly what I needed at that time. So I had like three very key, big mentors who over the years have just gotten bigger and bigger. Like, I'm kind of surprised I even knew those people. And then, of course, I got into Valiant right when, and it was right over the crest of the big bubble when everyone was making like, milling, selling comics. So the timing was just right where my first book, which was Rye and the Future Force #9, which I'm sure you all have because everyone bought one. It's sold like close to 900,000 copies.
Wow.
And then that was my first royalty check. And I was thinking like, wow, this is a great business to be in because money's just falling out of the sky. So that was, I'm not sure how it ended up at that place at that time, knowing all those people. But it all worked out for the best. And then it's been downhill ever since. I mean, in terms of like the business kind of like really contracting to the point where we are now, but I still love the medium and I'll be in it to the end. If there is ever an end, I don't think it's going to end, but I'll stick with it because it's oh, there it is. That gives me PTSD because yeah, I'm to blame for that book.
Hey, there's no such thing as being to blame about a comic book, frankly. That's all era based and stuff like that. And frankly, I mean, and we discussed it here on the show many a time that Valiant really had like a major impact at that particular time. And it was really like the perfect time for a company like Valiant to really get big. Like as it felt like more comic readers were exploring outside of DC and Marvel at that particular moment. And, they had other opportunities to read, some stuff other than just Spider-Man and, Batman and Superman out there. At least way more so in the public eye than were in previous years.
Right. I wish I could say I really appreciated that you know, the popularity of Valiant at the time kind of for me was kind of inexplicable because you look at what was going on in Image and you look at what's going on at Marvel, and those seem like really cool companies. I really wanted to be there because just the name recognition there, and then also the artwork was like very cutting edge. It was like heavy metal music, the visual equivalent of that. And I thought that was just ultra cool. And the way we did comics at Valiant was kind of like it looked kind of backwards to me, like so I didn't really appreciate the time I was there. I kind of, when I got there, was thinking that it was a stepping stone to Marvel. If I would be lucky enough, I'd be able to step off into Marvel. And that was really bad attitude because since I was at Marvel, when I got there and worked there for a while, I was like, it was really better at Valiant. There was something special there. But having nothing to gauge it against, I didn't appreciate it. But I do now, though. I mean, that was a special time. All of those contacts, the people I met there, they're lifelong friends. And I probably grew the most as an artist in that small little studio. So.
Sometimes looking back on it, you don't know what you got till it's gone, like the music goes, and
exactly.
I mean, mind you, when you did get to Marvel, having the terrific opportunity to work on Iron Man like you did with a luminary of the industry like Kurt Busiek, that run to me is still to this day one of my favorite runs.
Great run.
Oh, cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, again, that's more fortuitous timing because my goal was to work my way up to the top of Valiant. Then you can step off into the bigger pond. So the top book there was Exo-Man of War, which is, I didn't particularly want to draw like a flying armored guy because I like drawing people, and that's always covered up in like a high-tech machinery stuff. So I worked my way up until Exo-Man of War. And then right when that happened, Iron Man was coming back from Image to Marvel, and that was that big event called Heroes Return. So all eyes were on like, well, who's going to take over those books when they come back? I mean, there's like 4 books or something like that. And then I just happened to have maybe like 6 issues of Exo-Man of War under my belt that I can show, and it really takes you into like close striking distance of what Iron Man's going to look like, because it's basically the same character except with different colors. So when they looked at it, it's like, well, okay, this guy doing Iron Man, we can see what it's going to look like, and they had some kind of a gumption that it would work out. So again, just like I'm not sure why Exo was the book that was the top at Valiant, and then the fact that they were looking for an artist for Iron Man, it just seemed like that leap. It's like people are just kind of laying out the path before me, and I just had to like walk over it. And I'm not even sure, like there's something bigger at work trying to usher me into higher up in comics. So again, just another fortuitous timing. It was the right project, the right time, right company. And then it really hit the ground running. Like when I think of it now, I couldn't ask for any more fortuitous timing.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you talk about, 90s comic books and what have you, and the way they were. I feel like Heroes Return was kind of like the end of that era and the beginning of a new era at Marvel, where it felt like storytelling was driving the comic books more again. After a time when it was, not that it was a bad thing, but that, it felt like maybe perhaps like the artwork was more important than the story that may have been told. With Heroes Return, we got back to that a little bit more. We got back to actual like full-fledged comic books. And honestly, well, quick question: were you the one who came up with with that particular Iron Man design, or was that someone else at Marvel that came up?
It's kind of a hybrid. I think, we had to kind of come up with his design, both the look of Tony Stark and the armor. So Kurt Busiek asked if I would take a design that Alex Ross did for, I'm not sure what he used it for, but I always said like, sure, I'm not looking to put my stamp on anything. It would just make it a lot easier for me if I can just use that armor. And I made some tweaks to it. And it just was very easy because it was just handed to me by Alex Ross, and then I kind of drew it, and people kind of attributed to me that I designed it. I did some tweaks, whatever, so I'll take the credit. But but yeah, that's where it came from though. And you know, it was, yeah, I mean, I think it was a fun book to draw, but in general, if you talk about like what's the hardest thing, I think one of the reasons why I got the book is because a lot of people just wouldn't want to touch it because it's just a lot of work.
Sure.
And I wasn't afraid of hard work back then. It was, if it was an opportunity and people were shying away from it because of the amount of work, then that gave me an in. And I did it for years. And before that, I drew X-Men Man of War for 1 year. So it's like, you know, quite a long time of drawing these armored people. And I got the sense that I got that book because I probably couldn't draw the human figure that well. So the fact is all covered up, and I can draw the machines well because I went to Carnegie Mellon University and have a degree in industrial design.
Oh, nice.
So this is kind of the type of stuff that I draw a lot, and it was just a good fit for me.
What was a great part of that run, though, Sean, was that, to piggyback on what Ian was saying, is because I did not care for the whole heroes, the whole image thing they did. And when I remember how much I loved this new Iron Man run, because your stories were also emphasizing like Tony Stark as like the industrial magnate, and there was like espionage in it, and the debonair's part. It just felt like really classic Iron Man, just, you know, updated for that time period. But it was just a delight to read every month, and a real refresher.
Oh, cool. Yeah, you know, I guess that's really Kurt Busiek and his. I think he came from a time, and he knows of a time when comics told great stories. And then, you know, so he's not in charge of the art. But with my contributions, like I wasn't really reading all those comics back then. I drew the comic like I thought it was supposed to be drawn from what I read in Heavy Metal magazine. Like you have to tell the story, and then there's things that you have to draw. If you don't know how to draw it, you have to learn how to draw it because you have to tell the story. And so there's no cheating it. And it was tough. And people were saying things about it, but I'm just asking, well, aren't I just doing my job? And a lot of it came from the storytelling stuff, came from David Mazzucchelli, who was a master storyteller, who really gave me a crash course on how to tell stories in comics. And then Barry Windsor Smith, a lot of people kind of know him for his draftsmanship, but he was a great storyteller too. And he told me how to, like, you know, the setup and payoff. And everything they said, I just ate it up because I knew that those guys were great, and they were going to make me great if I listened to them. So I drew Iron Man the way I thought comics are drawn, and I didn't know it was any different than what came before until I read what came before. And I realized a lot of times it's just a lot of artists just drawing whatever they want just to make it look as cool as possible, and the story really took a back seat.
Yeah, and the sentient armor arc in general, like that just to this day holds up as one of my favorite runs and arcs on Iron Man in general, just because, like, really it was the next logical step when you think about it, you know, because for years, you know, the armor was just an armor, and obviously as technology advances and you add more, you know, bells and whistles to something, and of course as computer technology advances, you're going to get to a point where clearly the next step is sentience. And there we were, you know, it just made sense for the character at that particular point to go that route.
Yeah, that was Joe Quesada, right? I mean, he wrote that arc. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and a lot of people kind of snicker at that. I really love working with him. That really gave me a shot in the arm. Like, I think after a while of drawing, when he came on, I was thinking, like, well, I'm going to make this the best thing I've ever drawn, and I'll put in all the time it takes, because that's, you know, I like Joe. He's a good friend, and he has a story to tell, and I really want to live up to this. I know a lot of people are going to be looking at it because it's just a kind of a new beginning. So I really tried my hardest to draw it well, and Joe's a great storyteller. And there were a lot of people kind of snickering at it because there was some sort of a love affair that the armor had with him, and whatever. But yeah, that was kind of cool. Like, Joe is always a guy who wasn't really into the status quo, like just to tell stories, like spinning your wheels forever. He really wanted to evolve every character. And of course, the danger with that is you can evolve yourself to an end, and then the characters, like a lot of times what's happening now, is they become unrecognizable because they kind of evolve into something else. But yeah, you know, a lot of times stories are not like real life. I mean, we evolve and we become different people, but these stories of these characters have to kind of stay kind of the same, just so that it's what we know and love. So it's a fine line there. I'm not sure how a lot of writers deal with this kind of episodic going on forever. I think it'd be some of the hardest things to write.
And it's hard sometimes, exactly the way that you said, like, you have to be innovative while at the same time, I mean, come on, we had an era where, Ben Reilly was Spider-Man, and eventually it was like, oh, hey, yeah, so you should probably make it back to Peter at this point, because people know who Peter Parker is, not who Ben Reilly is. Like, you gotta keep it there. And at the same time, there is some great stuff with like legacy characters being introduced where, new people take over the character, but it always seems to always wind up coming back one way or the other. Like one of my favorite characters growing up was Kyle Rayner, and he's still a Green Lantern over at DC, but of course, Hal's the main guy, because Hal's always going to be the main guy because he's the one that people think of. Same with Wally, although Wally West over at Flash and what have you. So it's a nice kind of like combo of same yet different that you need to keep going in order to make comics unique.
Right. So yeah, Joe would eventually take that philosophy over to Spider-Man, and he did this thing called what was it? One More Day or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, it can be very controversial and stirring the pot, but I admire that he has the guts to do that, because I don't think I'd be able to write ongoing type of thing. I think it's one of the hardest things to write out there. That's why with my book for Kickstarter, I'm just creating those people from whole cloth. So the continuity and then where they end up, I can kill the characters because it's my story.
I'm glad you segue into that, actually, because you mentioned that you've added writing to your belt, and this is a story that you've co-created with Daniel Wu, called EVERMIND, which is available on Kickstarter as we record this. 14 days to go as of this recording. More than likely, if this comes out at midnight tonight, there'll be 13 days left to go. But first off, congratulations on well surpassing your goal.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's good to see.
Fully funded in 2 hours, right?
Wow.
Yeah, in just over 2 hours. And this is our first Kickstarter. It's my first Kickstarter, and also my publishing company's. It's their first Kickstarter, so we had no idea what to expect. So I mean, and also with Daniel Wu being thrown in there as sort of like the wild card, who knows what's going to happen with that. So we're very happy with what came out, and and so even though we hit our goal, it's of course like we're going to push it as far as possible, because I think it's always good to like get a big following together, because there's a lot of talk, especially amongst Daniel Wu and the publisher, to take this into another media, another realm there. So that's their goal. So we're trying to get this to have as many backers as possible.
So was it a full collaboration between the two of you, or did one of you come up with the concept and then reach out to the other?
Well, okay, my publisher, Carl Choi from 24/7 Comics, he asked if I had any ideas where I wanted to write, because he knew I always kind of wanted to write. So one time on Instagram, I showed a picture. I think the picture is actually in the in the campaign. It's a drawing of a female robot. I mean, and a gorilla. Yeah, that picture right there. So that image I created 20 years ago. Mostly because I was in a studio of artists with Bernard Chang and Tommy Lee Edwards, and we were trying to put out a studio sketchbook. And you can't put too many Marvel or DC things in there, because those are all characters that we don't own. So they told me to draw something that's not owned by Marvel or DC and just put it in the sketchbook. So I came up with this, and then it got in the sketchbook. And when I was at San Diego set up, someone came by the table and they were flipping through, and they stopped on that picture, and they said, like, this is like, is there more of this? Like, is there a comic, or is there a story behind it? And I said, no, it's just a picture. It's for the sketchbook. I drew it. It looks like there's a story behind it, but there isn't. And And then he kind of like wouldn't take that answer, and he kept on prodding, like, "Well, what is your idea behind it?" It's like, "There's no idea. It's a cool picture." And then he just took off. So the person who was tabling next to me said, like, "That was a Hollywood guy. He's looking for properties that are outside of Marvel and DC to possibly turn into TV or movies." And I was like, "Oh wow, that's cool." And then over the years, people would kind of flip through our sketchbook, flip through my portfolio, and they would stop on this picture. Like, people kind of look at it and they kind of think there's some kind of story there. So my publisher said, like, "Let's make the story about this image. So let's come up with an idea." So we were brainstorming for a long time. And then we got the story to the point where I started drawing it. And I asked my publisher, like, "Well, who do you see as the main character, the man, the professor, or the scientist?" And he says, "I want you to draw Daniel Wu because I like the guy and he's a friend." So I was like, "All right, whatever." And then I drew him in it. And we got to like maybe like issue 2. And then he said, like, "Well, this is really cool. I want to take this to Daniel Wu and see whether, he wants to get on board with it." So he took it to Daniel Wu, and Daniel Wu really loved it. So he was on board because he kind of saw it was like a character that maybe he could play one day. And I think the good thing about that is, when you write, sometimes you write in broad strokes. You have characters that are just basically there to serve a purpose. And then when you bring an actor on board, an actor is intrinsically interested in character. So they're always looking for like backstory and looking for ways to make a nuanced performance when they play a character. So he was able to fill out this guy's backstory and everything and how he should act. And then he started really taking a role like in those writers' room, really shaping the story and telling it from a character standpoint. Like, I think like you read this story, a lot of times with sci-fi, it ends up being all plot based, a lot of robot battles and spaceships. But this one is very character driven, and that's Daniel Wu's involvement. You can see like there's a relationship between the man and his daughter. It really is the spine of the whole story, and then all the plot stuff really, it's really their feelings about those things that is what the story is about. It's not so much about like, here's action and we're going to push these characters around. It's like, what do these characters need to show? What do they need to be thinking about something? And then we start, folding the plot into that. So yeah, I mean, he's been great. He's a great collaborator, and it's just great to have him on board because at the very least he can do the voiceovers for the video, which I'm a behind the scenes guy. It's great to have someone forward facing to take over all the promotional stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And with somebody who's, had a career like him. I mean, most recently, I watched American Born Chinese somewhat recently after it came out. And I thoroughly enjoyed that series overall. It was amazing that like almost everybody from Everything Everywhere All at Once was like crammed in there with other actors and actresses as well. To really like build that story out, because I love the original comic book, but it had its own unique personality and feel to it that I really truly appreciated. And everybody who worked on that did a wonderful job.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it too. So it's also good timing that right when he got off of the press junket for that, he was available to take this on. And then, now we have him doing a lot of press for this. So. It's something good to do during the whole strike that was happening. So,
absolutely. And the story wise, I mean, you were generous enough to give us the first 3 issues to look over before we hopped on this call here, and I'd say like overall, I'd say like the best way for me to describe it from these first couple of issues is Westworld meets Disney meets Iron Man. Like it's got a bunch of different elements thrown in there, and it all blends really well. It meshes pretty well all together into its own unique package. And I'm intrigued by it, definitely.
Okay. So I think when you read this, you'll see that there's like a lot of big ideas in it. There's like maybe like 3 or 4 very unique original ideas that are very intriguing. And a lot of times when you have a story like this, you have people folding in ideas, and you can really see how they're kind of like, it's a lumpy mix because they don't really belong together. But you can kind of see like everything like you said, it does connect together, and there's a reason for everything to be in there. So when it comes to writing stories with big ideas, I think the problem now with a lot of comics and a lot of movies, and a lot of stuff you see on streaming, they'll take a very safe route, which is take something that was successful before and kind of put a new veneer on it to release it again and make more money. That way, you don't take a big swing. It's a very safe thing to do. But I think the problem is that people kind of are getting kind of bored of this, like similar stories and a similar feeling. There's even like a superhero fatigue that's maybe starting to happen. So this takes a big swing, and people can't afford to do that in comics because it's cheap to fail in comics. But failing in comics is not something I want to do at all. So I come armed with lots and lots of storytelling, just like studying story for decades. So I took the original Robert McKee writing seminar, like maybe 25 years ago, 20 years ago, and just been a student of writing ever since. I love watching movies, and the really well-written movies really charge me up emotionally, and I just want to know how that's done. So taking a deep dive into reverse engineering how stories happen. So I was able to, when I wrote this, to compress all those ideas, and really a lot of it's about compressing, because in sci-fi there's a lot of exposition you have to go through, which is kind of a tough slog, and then it can be very action plot based, which is can be kind of boring. With like a lot of action happening but no story. So all of that stuff that you read was really in 3 issues, and it's, you know, that's not that much space, but a lot has happened and a lot of ideas are brought up, and then the second half of the story is coming up in the next Kickstarter. So yeah, I mean, it's a wild ride, and it's not, certainly not decompressed, because that decompressed story stuff is I don't understand why that was ever a thing. I think that we do need to compress. So with this, we compressed to the point where it actually started to hurt things a little bit, because things happened so quickly that there was like emotional beats that were kind of missing because they were kind of moving on to the next thing. So based on a lot of beta reader feedback, we're actually inserting more and more pages to kind of heighten the emotional moment and slow things down just a bit. So yeah, that's, you know, we're constantly working on revising these 3 issues to be as good as possible. And I hope that when people read it, that they'll like it and they'll appreciate all the hard work that went into it.
Absolutely.
Well, I read, Sean, I read issues 1 and 2 today. I didn't get to 3 yet, but I got to tell you, you took a swing and you connected. Just to piggyback on some of the things you were saying, just the whole story about the scientist and the classic trope, you know, is my work for the benefit of humanity, or is it going to do more damage? And am I compromising myself because, you know, I had this satanic Walt Disney figure who's like overseeing what I'm doing and so forth. But what really affected me with this book was how well I think you handle the different plot threads that are going on here. I was totally captivated by you're showing the technology in one hand as like this entertainment source, both above and below ground in this Disney-esque theme park. And then you have the military using it for its own purposes, which is very sinister. And I love the scenes with the guerrilla forces who were sent in to launch this coup. It was very sophisticated, very well written. You really show the consequences of what was going on there, and the relationship between the scientist and his daughter. Excellent dialogue. It's really nice to have a book again where there's a good chunk of dialogue in it, and I mean that in the best possible way. I was really enjoying reading this book. It wasn't just, you know, images. There was real heart to the characters, that you really got a sense of who they were, where they were coming from, what was going on in their head. It was really a pleasure to read.
Great, thanks a lot. I mean, I think a lot of that's attributed to the fact that you know, I try to take a lot of courses in writing and creating comics. There's not that much out there. You can quickly consume all of that material, but I took it over the pandemic. I took a deep dive into YouTube and all the writing material that's out there. So there's screenplay writing and there's novel writing. And, you know, when they teach those classes, the stakes there are very high, because novels don't really succeed that often, in screenplays, you know, to get something seen all the way through. It's a very tight, very specific thing, and it has to be at a very high quality. And I guess that kind of infects my story, because I have to remind myself, I'm just making a comic book here. There's 3 issues. But it's written with all the stakes of writing a screenplay, as if you're trying to get a studio to back your project for millions and millions of dollars. So it is very tightly written, and it's been revised. It's been redrafted like maybe 10 or 20 times. And the dialogue is combed over and over again, and tightened and compressed. And so it has a lot of layers and a lot of nuance to it. And I'm glad you because a lot of people would just like kind of read it and just notice all the action stuff. But there's a lot of nuance there with all the character story, which is really what interests me.
Well,
so
the action
you know,
scenes are great. Like the combat scenes are fantastic when they're storming into that facility, but it's really the characterization for me that really intrigued me about this book, and especially, like I said, the struggle of the scientist, because you see him really, really struggling with what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Is this really where I should be? Am I compromising myself too much? And he's got like his daughter kind of on one shoulder and Bobo on the other, and it's
right.
it's very well done.
Yeah, there's this thing called in writing, I call it the four corners opposition. A lot of times in comics you have like a villain that's all bad and then the hero that's all good. I think the best characters are always like you can kind of create characters that shine a light on different aspects of even with Thanos, as bad as he is and as evil as his plan was, we can really sympathize with him. He had a relationship with a daughter, and also what he wanted was not just incredible amounts of power and money for himself. He really wanted to kind of preserve the universe because he thought it was overpopulated. So you can kind of see that it's hard just to hate him because he just was the hero of his own story. So to write characters like that, all that stuff came from tons and tons of reading about how stories are put together, and almost like with a checkbox, like, do I have the proper mentor for him? Is he going in the right direction? Is there a pull in both directions? Are the stakes constantly going up, as he does more and more bad things, forced to do more bad things? So that's all solid kind of storytelling stuff that's age old, that for some reason, a lot of times in comics especially, I think writers haven't kind of gotten away from that. And I think that's not good, because writing well is a very specific thing, and it requires lots and lots of study, and it's not easy. And I don't expect people to take as much time as I did to write this, because they have to put food on the table. But I don't, because I had a big royalty check from writing Future Force #9, and I can take 2 years to put out 3 issues if I want. So, this Kickstarter is sort of like the culmination of those 2 years, very condensed. And, I think I'm just hoping that it does well, because I put a lot of time into it.
Well, one thing that worked well for me is not too long ago I went to Disney, so this was all very fresh in my mind. As somebody who just spent like a week at Universal and Disney, like literally like a month ago, to then think about, oh God, what if this type of stuff is actually happening behind the scenes? It just adds to the whole like quote unquote evil empire-ness of it all.
Yeah, that was one of those big ideas. I talk about, like, there's some ideas in the story. It really cares towards, obviously children, but primarily girls, because it's the princesses, and then they're cartoon characters. But girls are really a small part of the family. Like, there's adults that go to Disney, and they would actually, they're looking to leave as soon as they get there, because there's nothing there for them. So at one point, Disney tried to increase their profits, because there was like this counter programming going on right outside their theme park, which was called Church Street Station or something, that was just bringing people outside of and that really got, was it Bob Iger or something, was really pissed off at that. So then he opened, what was it, the Pleasure Island in Disney.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It didn't last very long, but that's to keep the adults in, and they were competing with what's going on outside. So you can see, like, when there's money that they want to make, they try to have programming there that will entertain the adults. And I just thought that if this Disney was built on top of this huge cavern underneath, they would just go downstairs, and then those animatronics that play the princesses and the big gorilla will go down there at night and become strippers and hostess women and the big fighting robots. So there's like a man cave going on down there, just to increase profits, because there's an incredible drive that they need money very fast for Lucas Zhang's next level invention that's going to change the world that he has to do. So you can kind of see like they're just quoting disaster with what they're doing, and it's just fun to watch these guys, do stuff that gets children hurt. So.
Well, without spoiling too much for people who read it, the sequence I really enjoyed thoroughly. I thought it was so well executed. It's that flashback, the whole incident with the animatronic chimp.
Ah, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, let me say something
really
about
well
that. I said before that writing science fiction, especially if you're starting a new story that's science fiction, there's a tremendous amount of exposition. And exposition is a dirty word because it stops the story and it gives people like some sort of like history lesson. And it's really a bitter pill to swallow. And that's where most people nope out of a story, because it's like you're in a lecture telling you how the world works. But I think if a writer really has his chops, you can make those exposition points into the best parts of a story. So that part that you read there with the chimpanzee, the robot chimpanzee, that was all exposition to kind of get across this very important point of this thing called the, what was it called? That gene, the warrior gene.
Yes.
I have to explain that. And I have to explain it in a way that's not just like a lecture. So that scene was created. There's a concept in writing called the sugar-coated pill. The pill is the exposition you need to get across in order to understand the story. So you coat it in sugar so that you would eagerly eat it. And if you do a really good job, that becomes the highlight of your story. Something that's really there just to provide exposition. So
yeah,
Murd, it was a damn good sugar pill.
Yes. Absolutely. Murd, I'd love to get your thoughts on what we were presented with a little bit, if you don't mind.
Well, it's a very good balance of concept-driven sci-fi and just to talk about your sugarcoating. Lots of action and violence and even a little bit of sex. What with the stripper bots down in the underworld, just for the reader who's into that sort of thing. And I like Ian, I responded to the portrayal of the Disney-like corporation, the Bobo Corp here, because I earned a master's degree in popular culture studies once upon a time, and we pop culture grads were all forever being exposed to ominous evocations of the name of the military industrial entertainment complex.
yes.
And Disney was apparently kind of a prime mover in that concept. And wow. I could just kind of picture my introduction to theory and methods instructor, who was deeply Marxist and hated Disney. I can just picture him looking over my shoulder at the EVERMIND issues we were reading and grinning with pleasure at the suggestion that this Disney-like corporation would, cater to such a unsavory mix of clientele and also be fully in bed with these paramilitary black ops types that are renting, Disney cybernetically linked audio animatronics for paramilitary missions.
You can kind of see it's a very complicated. I go on these interviews and they say, "What is your story about?" And I'm in trouble when they ask that because it's very hard to say what it's about. Yeah, and when you get to that point, then people say, "Well, I'm not going to read it because if you don't know what it's about, or it just sounds like it's about too many things and you don't know what you're doing." So I'm going to pass. So I really dread that question, like, what is it about? It's one of those things like when, I think when George Lucas was trying to get funding to make Star Wars, he would tell people what it's about. And then they'll like say, oh, okay, Wookiees and robots, so it's for kids, right? And he's like, no, it's also got some heavy themes, like it's like a space opera. And because there's nothing around like it, they just would pass on it. So he just had to make it on his own. And you will like it after you saw it, but it's hard to describe before seeing it, though. So
that's the thing about new stories, is that you quite literally have to read them in order to actually fully understand them. Because yes, as you just said there, Sean, like a blurb isn't going to tell you the whole damn thing. Like you got to sit down and decide whether or not it's for you, and then once you have, then you can form your opinion and write about it all over the internet.
So yeah, that's the challenge with the Kickstarter. This guy who's known as an artist is actually writing for the first time, and that's a red flag right there. So people kind of know what to expect of my art because it's been out there for so long. But even that wouldn't be quite true because the art is kind of leveled up in this, because this is my baby, and I would do the best drawing of my life on this because it's my own story. And then so there comes the question of, well, can this artist write because he has no experience writing? And with that, it's just going to be like a leap of faith. And all I can do is just, send a review copy or just tell them to give it a try. Oh, yeah. And I think so far people have been reading it, they've been liking it. And a lot of people say that for the interview purposes, they would have to read the first issue, but they would read it all the way through. So it's like, having to binge the entire season once you started, even though it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. It's one of those things, you get that category called unputdownable, which is the highest praise you can get as a writer.
Yes.
As opposed to the DNF, did not finish, which is the worst thing you can hear. So quite often I've been getting the, I read it all the way through and I want to read more, which is, the best thing I can hear. And I'm really thrilled that people are saying that, because it does feel good, because it's been a lot of work and a lot of nerve, and I put it out there. And thankfully, with a little tweaking, it's got to a point where it's in good shape. So
I think that one of the things that I appreciate the most about reading these, review copies is we get to see both sides of the table. Is that, because it's not a quite complete process yet, we get to see the, the fully colored images, and then we get to see the black and whites with the, with the version of text that's on there. And it's almost like seeing, the cake being baked, which I actually really appreciate, because your just straight up inked pages look amazing, as do the colored. So it's a nice little behind the scenes feature that us podcasters get to enjoy every now and then.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I did everything except the coloring in this, and I think when people see it kind of in progress, I wish there was an experience where you can see what you saw, just see it very raw. A lot of those dialogue is just placeholder dialogue, and then there's my hand-drawn balloons in there and everything. It's really janky looking. But we do have a tier in the Kickstarter. I think it's called the Artist Edition, which is all 3 issues in black and white without the word balloons. Yep. And then with that tier, you also get the PDF of the fully colored comic you can read on your computer, but you can have the entire comic in black and white. And, I don't know what people's opinion of my black and white is. I assume that people only want to see color comics. But surprisingly, people can see a lot of all of the hatching, delicate hatching, and all it's a different experience with the black and white, and it's an experience that they want. So my publisher put out this artist edition one this is the CGC version of artist edition. So this comes slab, which is why it's incredibly expensive. Yeah. But there are versions of it where they're much cheaper, and it's so it's in black and white. So I'm glad that you said that about the black and white. I just didn't know how much of a market there was for seeing uncolored comics.
Well, also, just as a fan of manga and stuff like that, I've been reading black and white comics for just about as long as I've been reading comics. So it's cool to see both sides of the coin. I've read Scott Pilgrim versus the World in black and white. I've read Scott Pilgrim versus the World in color. It's just two different ways to experience a comic book, and the fact that you have both opportunities out there is pretty damn cool. So. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Surprising number of people have been backing it at that level to get the artist edition. So and that makes me feel great, because I just didn't know how much my work was valuable, how valuable it was without the color. So I'm glad that people are actually liking it.
Definitely. Talk a little bit about the different tiers, and also, for that matter, since you did fund, as Murd said, within 2 hours, any further stretch goals that may potentially be reached, or anything of the sort?
Well, we're kind of building those stretch goals all the time. And like I said, this is our first Kickstarter, and I'm a very creative guy. Like I'm a maker, and I have a lot of there's a lot I can offer. I'm just trying to figure out what people want to see. So we have some really creative stretch goals coming up. But with the tiers, I know from what I know, like the most popular one is probably like the $35 one, which is a copy of the 3 issues and then the PDF, and that's a fairly reasonable price for that package. And then, like I said, one step up from that is the artist edition, where you get the black and white comic, and then also the PDF in there. that's colored and readable. And then beyond that, I'm not sure, this was put together by my publisher, but there are tiers that have original art because, you know, I've been in the industry for a long time. I have a lot of original art piling up. So I just gave it to them to make a tier where you get some original art that's signed, and they're, you know, from my run on Iron Man, Nova, Elektra, some Spider-Man, Avengers Academy, some Batman Beyonds. It's all in there. And that's been a popular one. And then there's a whole bunch of tiers that have to do with CGC where Daniel Wu's involved, so you can get both of our signatures. So I think I don't know the exact details of those, but they're all available, and we're just building more of these as the campaign goes on. So in the next couple of weeks, you know, could have some really cool stuff to show.
Fantastic. And how far do you foresee this book going? I know you already mentioned that there'll be a second Kickstarter for the second arc. I mean, do you see it being something that could potentially last, you know, tens of issues, hundreds of issues? Like, what are you thinking in your brain at this particular moment?
Well, I mean, we kind of built the whole lore of this story. A lot of it focuses around that whole the Disney analog that we have going on there, and that starts all the way back in, you know, 1926. And so there's a big framework there, and a lot of great stories can spin out of it. You know, when I'm creating a story, I kind of see this. I kind of create like it's a screenplay, and not have to play by the rules of episodic stuff that has to have come back year after year. So, you know, I wrote it from the end first, and then I was told after a while, because there are business people involved that need to protect their investment, that I was advised to finish the story arc, but not completely finish the character arc. And to me, that means that they want to leave it open just in case for more. You know, I told them I really wasn't, you know, I told them, like, when we first started this, that I think it's kind of a common thing to do, to think of the back end in terms of being a movie or TV show. I wasn't interested in that at all. I'm a guy who makes comics. I write for comics and I draw for comics. And to me, this is the end all be all of the story. Whatever happens after that is just, you know, they can give me money, but I won't be involved with any of that. And I told my publisher that if he brings me into any meetings with Hollywood executives, I'm not going to play nice, because I don't really care about that stuff. And then if I want to kill the characters, I'm going to kill them, because I think, I mean, this is a story in the end about someone who's trying to come up with the scientific first steps for immortality. So, you know, I think there's a story points there where there's arguments that he may not live. So we're kind of dealing with that now, because for the first time, I'm part of this company now, and I've been exposed to the business side, and I've been told that comics necessarily don't make that much money. You might be able to break even, so you really do need to entertain. And the hard thing with that is it affects the story, and I don't like that part. So I would try to find the best way out of it, and then
and then go from there.
So yeah, there's that. Yeah.
That is something, though. I mean, you know, money aside, that is something that I appreciate about independent comics, is that you do have way more leeway, because, as you said previously, these are your characters. And that means, you know, you're way less constrained by everything needs to somehow work its way out by the end of these 6 issues. You know, like everybody's back to their starting point, so that next artist and writer can take over the character and not have them be missing a leg. You know, like that's
right.
because how do you get out of that? And that's something that you definitely have a benefit with independent comics, is that it's your bag. You know, you do what you want with it, and they're your characters to take home and do what you will.
Right. Yeah. I don't see how people write under I get that they have to do, like, the way Marvel and DC has to keep their characters kind of evergreen. I completely get it. I just don't know how writers are able to do it. That's above my pay grade. And so.
Well, I'm very happy that you're doing what you're doing here, Sean. I think this is very much has me intrigued. And I'm thoroughly looking forward to what we're going to get with the next arc once this is all said and done. Once again, as we are recording this is 14 days to go, so you'll probably have about 13 days left to back this particular Kickstarter. Let everybody know where they could find it, and if you have any social medias or anything of the sort as well, where they could find you to make sure that that they're going to be able to check out Evermind.
Okay, well, I primarily am on Instagram, so the handle there is Sean Chen Art, and I post images daily, and usually like a lot of work in progress of the stuff I'm doing, spoilery stuff of issue 4 and 5 are kind of being put up there now. So where to find Evermind the comic? It's on Kickstarter now, and I guess if you Google either Kickstarter in my name or Kickstarter in Evermind or Daniel Wu, you can find it. I mean, I have a link, but I don't really know if I can get it to you, but it's easy to find. And if you go to my Instagram, the link is in my bio, and I encourage everyone to check it out, and please pick a tier that suits you, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, you kind of want to be on the ground floor because they have plans for this, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Definitely. Well, I'm very much looking forward to it. And
Here.
Sean, thank you for reaching out in the first place. It was great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us, Sean. We
yes,
really
absolutely.
appreciate it. And yes, once again, please go to Kickstarter and back Evermind. It's going to be well worth your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. It's always great going on an interview. You get to talk about yourself, so that's what's better than that.
I agree. Not that I do that ever myself or anything like that.
Okay.
All right. Have a good night.
Take care, sir.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate
You bet.
it.
All right. Great. Sean Chen. Good conversation. Very
Great
very
conversation.
I love it. I love it when a guest gets like starts and like it's like a car revving up, and then from there you can basically just sit back and listen to them talk about what you want them to talk about. That is absolutely my favorite thing to do. Good time,
especially because he has such a coherent vision for what he wants to do.
Oh yeah,
and the work. I didn't get a chance to read issue 3 yet, but I really enjoyed issue 1 and 2. I mean, 2 even more than 1. Frankly, I thought 2 the book really started to take off for me. I really enjoyed it.
Yep. Issue 3 contains an interesting turn concerning the main character and his daughter.
Yep, and it very much makes the entire arc the not quite superhero origin story, but like we're basically there. Like things are set up for the future in very, very unique ways. So 100% looking forward to what we're going to get in future installments. Definitely.
Sean was very wise to put the robot gorilla front and center in all the programs. Because as Jamie would gladly remind us, were he still with us, gorillas sell comics.
I thought the same thing, Murd. Yep.
Yes. Yep. They most definitely do, Murd, and it's a cool design. Like I was thinking Donkey Kong the entire time, only more creepy and menacing. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, Donkey Kong by way of Five Nights at Freddy's, perhaps.
Yes. Good comparison. I like that. All right. Obviously, we still have more comics to talk, as it is a comic talk episode here. And I want to start off with you, Murd, because you just came back from a interesting summit, my friend.
That's right.
Yes, and I'm fully prepared and happy to talk about that because I don't have any comics to talk about, so I might as well talk about a comics-related event I was able to attend.
Absolutely.
That's right. I got to take a vacation, or the closest thing that passes for it in my life, over this past weekend, and took an extended trip out west to my grad school alma mater, Bowling Green State University, to the Department of Popular Culture there, and in the library building there on campus, home of the Ray and Pat Brown Library of Popular Culture, which takes up pretty much the whole 4th floor. In the Palliser Conference Room, I was an attendant of Spider-Man in Popular Culture Conference.
Wow.
This is the program for that event. Check out this really cool logo, hand-designed by one of the event organizers, Tyne Lowe of the Pop Culture Library. Also put together by our friend and listener of the show, Dr. Chuck Coletta, who used to post as Jack Sir on the old forums, and also Dr. Matt Donahue, both of whom were at Bowling Green when I was there in 2004 through 2006. And they put together the Batman conference that happened in 2019, and this is their follow-up, and I have to say it was a resounding success. It was very well attended. I mean, it's hard to gauge with the naked eye how many people were actually there because people kept drifting in and out in the course of the 2 days. and the many hours worth of panels. Some of them were students who just showed up whenever they could in between classes and whatnot. But there were other people who were there for the whole time, such as myself. And there was a lot of different presenters. Some of whom were not able to make it. On the second day, there were supposed to be a couple of professors coming in from South Asia, like one from India who was going to talk about Pavitra Prabhakar, Spider-Man India, and the other one was from the University of the Punjab to give a talk about a local Spider-Man at political events in Pakistan.
Oh.
So approaching the icon that is Spider-Man from many different angles here, all these different talks. And it was, I think all told, it was like something like close to 20 hours of academic presentations about Spider-Man on a wide range of topics. I did want to read a couple of these to you guys. Let's see here, just to give you a sample of the topics on hand. It was divided into like 3 or 4 panels of 3 or 4 different essays, loosely connected by theme. There was one about science fiction and the supernatural in Spider-Man. There was one talk about like horror aspects of Spider-Man, and another about loving the alien, the magic totems, Jungian fever dreams, and eerie ufology resonating within Spider-Man mythos.
Fantastic, Murd.
Just for a start.
Holy
there was, you'd appreciate this, Chris. There was a woman who gave a talk specifically about the Gwen Stacy miniseries written by Christos Gage and drawn by Todd Knock.
Love that story. Yep.
Move over, Nancy Drew. Here comes Gwen Stacy. The teenage girl detective goes sleuthing in the Spider-Man universe.
Oh, I would have enjoyed that thoroughly. Yep.
Examining that specific take on Gwen Stacy through the lens of other teen sleuths like Nancy Drew, for example.
Yep.
And Veronica
Great comparison.
Mars.
Yep.
Let's see. There was a guy who talked about artistic minimalism in Spider-Man, specifically Sal Buscema's spectacular Spider-Man run.
Great run.
There was a man from the Cuyahoga County Public Library who did a compare and contrast of Kirby and Ditko's versions of the covers to Amazing Fantasy 15.
Oh, fantastic.
As a way into the different stylistic philosophies of those two artists. There was a whole panel of Spider-Man and religion, spinning a web of spirituality. One panel talked about the Sin Eater specifically. Another one talked about Demogoblin and the nature of the demonic. I particularly enjoyed that one.
Oh my God, Demogoblin. Oh, that brings me back.
Yeah, because interesting character, really. He wasn't just some scary monster creature that possessed Masondale for a while. He eventually became an autonomous being, and he was interested in hunting and killing sinners, and he gave his life to save a child, which was more than his former host Masondale would have done. So we had an actual student of theology and religious studies from Northern Virginia Community College come in to talk about that. Oh. The panel immediately preceding it was called Mother Goddesses and the Incarnation, Passion, and Resurrection of Spider-Man, the Transformative Nature of Shriek, Shafra, and Ero.
Yes.
Wow.
So 3 mother goddess type Spider-Man villains there. And then the last panel on the first day was one of my old faculty mentors, Dr. Jerry Wallach, who was on my thesis committee. And by his own admission at that time, he knew almost nothing about superhero comics. But he's learned more about them over the years. His late wife and former pop culture professor, Dr. Esther Clinton, was a fan of superheroes, among other things. So he got a kind of a crash education there. And he came to this panel and this conference, and he did a panel about... he's an ethnomusicologist by trade, but he also loves dinosaurs, and occasionally teaches a class about dinosaurs in popular culture. So he talked about a plastic Spider Rex toy that was produced with Marvel licensing, and talked about how superheroes can be used as a way to, like a loophole to trademark a living creature, which ordinarily you can't do. And so we talked about Spider Rex, who actually found his way into the Spider-Man comics and was even given an origin story in one of those Edge of Spider-Verse miniseries that they did at Marvel.
I was going to say, I think Spider Rex may have been in the background of Across the Spider-Verse at one point, if I'm remembering correctly.
I'm sure he was, and he actually got to be the star of his own story at one point, where we learned he was actually a pteranodon named PTER Tarker. He was being chased by like an Osbornosaurus Rex when a radioactive meteor swarming with space spiders crashed and switched their minds, and also gave both bodies like super spider powers, so that Parker ended up in the T-Rex body, and the Osbornosaurus ended up in the Pteranodon body, and it mutated into this big green bat glider looking thing.
Nice.
And then they fought. So he's got his old supporting cast. There's even like an Eddie Brachiosaurus who gained venom powers, of course.
Of course.
So yeah, that was fun. Let's see. There were some keynote speakers. There were a couple of actual comics professionals on hand. Mark Sumerak, who had been editor and also freelance writer at Marvel for a number of years, and he was very involved in the Spider-Girl series that everyone so loves. He was on. He gave a good talk, and he was very articulate, and he more thoroughly answered the questions that followed his panel than a lot of the other presenters were able to. And also Rick Leonardi was there, co-creator of Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099.
Very cool.
Yep, he had some fun things to say about the philosophy behind, different artistic philosophies behind drawing the character. He's such a soft-spoken gentleman, though, and he didn't eat the mic enough, so much of what he had to say was lost, unfortunately. We also had a guy named Jim Collins, who is the owner of Toledo's premier comic book store, JC's Comic Stop. I was a customer of his for 2 years while I was earning my degree. He gave a talk about Spider-Man and selling Spider-Man merch. And a guy named Bruce Wechtenheiser, who is a high school math teacher from Johnstown, PA, which is the hometown of Steve Ditko. And he's got one of the nation's largest collections of Spider-Man memorabilia, and he's got several Spider-Man suits, and he does public appearances, and he's oversaw the creation of a mural of Spider-Man in his hometown. So he's just a big Spider-Man cheerleader, and he was a good... He got the room pepped up again just when they were starting to glaze over from too many hours of presentations. So his enthusiasm for the character is infectious. No, this is one of the best titles of the day. By Felicia, the evolving sexuality of Black Cat.
Outstanding.
For the win.
Job well done.
That's quite a topic.
Oh my God. Yep.
Let's see. There was a special presentation from the Pop Culture Library on all the different Spider-Man realia, which is actual physical objects as opposed to texts or video or audio. So like all the Spider-Man plastic toys and costumes and things that they have in their collection. And our friend Donovan Morgan Grant was there. I was glad to be a frequent guest on Comic Timing, and I got to meet him in person finally. And there it is. Here's Ian with the actual video from the presentation. And Chris, this is what the conference room looked like. The walls, thanks to Chuck Coletta, who is a huge, his office was on a par with Shane's Geek Room. He had tons of action figures. He had like the replica Shakespeare bust from the Adam West Batman show. Chris, he lined the wall. He practically papered the walls with reproductions of those early 70s Marvel blacklight posters. And yes, Eternity. You would have felt right at home, my friend. So Donovan's presentation was Tangled Web, Spider-Man and Fandom. He had some real audio on there from complaining Spider-Man. Well, I'm not sure they were even fans, really. They were more like media pundits who were complaining about certain creative choices that have been made by Marvel. And and he showed clips from the Spider-Man comic book letter columns dating back to the 60s, just to show that Spider-Man fandom has been toxic and contentious almost from the very beginning. People were giving veiled death threats to Jerry Conway when he killed Gwen Stacy.
This one I can actually read, so I just have to real quick. Dear Cruds, you evil-eyed, black-hearted, bow-legged, flint-hearted, claw-fingered, foul-bellied, bloodthirsty orcs! You killed Gwen! I mean, oh my God, you can't get better than that.
And we did our
Bugle in editorial.
We did our micro spotlight with Dan Gavazan on Spidey in that from that period in the Bronze Age. We read a bunch of those letters. They're hilarious.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there were a couple of Spider-Man focused podcasters too. There was one in particular that was called Let's Read Spider-Man. Nobody mentioned Dan Gavazdan the entire weekend. I was a little surprised, but Let's Read Spider-Man is hosted by two guys named James, and as the title implies, they're going through every Spider-Man comic published. They've made their way up to the 80s, just before the number of Spider-Man comics is going to explode. And they just do like no more than 30 minutes. They try to keep it bite-sized, and they talk about each and every Spider-Man comic published in order.
Wow,
So,
wow.
good luck to them in their future endeavors there, because it's about to get much more labor-intensive.
Yes.
Let's see. One of my favorites was one of the last ones, actually, on Saturday afternoon. Valerie the Librarian, the first Spider-Woman and the Librarian stereotype. And this is a gentleman from project archivist and visiting librarian at Indiana University Bloomington. He got an entire panel out of an issue of Spidey Super Stories, in which the character Valerie the Librarian, who is a recurring character on the Electric Company TV show, played by actress Hattie Winston, she appeared several times in Spidey Super Stories. Yep, there she is. And in Spidey Super Stories number 11, which was written by Jeannie Thomas, original first wife of Roy Thomas and an elementary school teacher. She wrote this story in which Valerie put on a Spider-Man costume and some suction cups and helped Spidey fight the Vulture. And so that is the first distaff spider character, the first Spider-Woman ever published by Marvel.
Wow.
And she's a woman of color, no less.
Go figure.
And the whole thing was wrapped up with a special appearance by a young man named Joshua Paycheck, which is spelled P-C-H-A-J-E-K, but he said it's pronounced Paycheck, so I believe him. And he's from Winnipeg, and he is a university student up there, and he plays Spider-Man professionally to entertain kids at parties and whatnot. And he's a little taller than you expect Peter to be, but he looks very much like you'd expect, even without the mask on. He looks like you'd expect Peter Parker to look. It's like a cross between Andrew Garfield and a John Romita drawing. It's kind of uncanny.
Wow.
And he's a good-hearted young man, and he showed us pictures of the 30 different Spider-Man suits he owns, plus a couple of Captain Americas and a Thor and a Star-Lord. He covers a bunch of bases, but Spidey is his favorite. And then that was a great note on which to end the entire thing.
Nice.
Murd, what an experience. Wow.
Yes. And meanwhile, Chuck and Matt and their colleagues kept us all well fed, because apparently they found some good sponsors for this thing. So they provided food, not just for the presenters, but for everybody who attended. We all got some good lunches, and there were not one, but two Spider-Man sheet cakes to enjoy.
But not Spider-Man wheat cakes?
Oh, jeez. To make us big and strong like Aunt May wanted.
Great field report, Murd. Great field report.
Yes, it was a great time, Chris. The entire event just felt so comfortable and so entertaining and informative, and I came away with some great new scholarly perspectives on Spider-Man and his cast and the mediascape he occupies. And I got to see some old friends. I got to catch up with Chuck a little bit and apologize to him for not advertising this thing on this podcast, as he had offered to have us do. But next time they do a comic book related conference, we will be there for them. And Excellent. It was well attended, as I said, because it even made the campus newspaper, because they still have one of those.
Nice.
It's really more like an advertising circular or a newsletter for campus current events, but still, it's out there. It's published on paper. And see here, these are the school mascots, Freddy and Frida Falcon in spider mode.
Fantastic.
Spider boys.
Well, speaking of fun and informative.
I listened to my Best of the Cowsill CD on the long drive back. It took me 11 hours straight to get from Bowling Green back to the Jersey Shore. But I listened to that, so I was able to practice my air harp, while keeping my knees on the steering wheel. As
Fantastic.
I hear that sound. Everything's just A-okay.
It is A-okay, and these questions are going to be A-okay, as it is time once again for Muddle the Murd. Once again, a reminder, and Murd's going to tell you how to do it in just a second. Please get your submissions in. We still have about 4 or 5 of them in the queue, but I would like to have more than that. We always like to have more than that. So please get your Muddle the Murd submissions in if you have not done so, and Murd is about to explain how you do that.
Oh, it's very simple, folks. In order to muddle the Murd, you must ask him, meaning me, 3 different comic book trivia questions. 1 Marvel question, 1 DC, and 1 about comics from some third publisher. Also, you need to break them down chronologically so that 1 of them is about comics pre-1970, 1 about comics published between 1970 and 2000, inclusive, meaning that the years 1970 and 2000 are a part of that bracket, and a 3rd question about comics published post-2000. Don't forget to include the answers, because otherwise we won't know if you've muddled the Murd or not. And then put them into an email, put Muddle the Murd in the subject line, and send it off to comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. We'll find them in the inbox, put them in a special subfolder to await the asking of the questions. Quizmaster Ian will do that. He will ask your 3 questions of me, the Murd, and if I fail to answer a single one of them right, if I get all 3 of them wrong, then you will have muddled the Murd, and then you will win a fantastic prize. And the fantastic prize we have on offer right now was provided by Mr. Eberly here, and it is this hardcover collection of the first arc of the J. Michael Straczynski and Olivier Coipel Thor series from 2007, the series that introduced the locale of Broxton, Oklahoma to the Marvel Universe.
That's fantastic. Well, this one comes a little close to home for you geeks, as this is a man who hails from Lancaster. And his name is Kevin Heller. And he has this to say: "Hey, Comic Geeks, I've been listening for a long time, but this is my first attempt at this. I love listening to you guys. As a kid, born 1983, so a year older than I never read comics, but I was into some of the animated shows like X-Men, Batman, and Spider-Man, and collected a lot of action figures, especially X-Men. Regret getting rid of them years ago, similar to Sean's origin story that we heard a little earlier on this very episode. Me and my girlfriend took a jump into comics in 2015 during Marvel's new Secret Wars event. Don't remember the exact reason why at this point, but we've been reading ever since. Sometime after that, I searched for comic podcasts and found you guys and have been listening ever since. Enjoy everything, especially the top 5s. Oh, speaking of which, we should do one of those soon.
We sure should.
I would do. Yes, indeed. We are indeed. I learned so much, and it makes me regret not starting reading a long time ago. You've built something great with the CGS show and community. Wholeheartedly agree with that. We live in Lancaster. Thank you very much indeed. We live in Lancaster, PA, so we're not too far away from some of you. We go to the comic store. I remember once Shane said he stops in sometimes if he's in the area. So if it's ever a Wednesday or Sunday, then we might cross paths. One of these days, I also hope to stop into the Christmas barn. But enough with the intro, on to the questions.
All right.
Excellent. We begin with DC pre-1970. Zatanna's first appearance was in Hawkman #4 in 1964. Hawkman and Hawkgirl investigate the mysterious arrival of 2 items in the Midway City Museum, and they each go to a different country where the objects may have originated. They each find an immobilized female magician who they find out is Zatanna. She was trying to find her father and split herself in 2 so she could search 2 places at once. Which 2 countries did she go to?
It'd be funny if one of them were Albania. That can only help me out Yoink style once per year, I think. But okay, yeah, I honestly don't know. I have not read Zatanna's first appearance. So, oh boy. Okay. What are 2 countries where magical objects are likely to appear? Okay. Well, I think Hawkman, I usually go to Egypt, and I'm going to say China for the other one.
You got 1 out of 2.
Okay. That's not bad.
Yep. You are correct on China. The second answer was Ireland. China and Ireland. So close and yet so far.
Yeah. So right. Strike 1.
Let's see what number 2 is here. Marvel 1970 to 2000. In November 1985, Marvel started a 4-issue miniseries for Nightcrawler. In the first issue, Kitty attempts to replicate the well at the center of time in the Danger Room, but accidentally manifests the real thing, which sucks Nightcrawler and Lockheed into it. They're transported to another world and end up on a flying pirate ship. What type of creature that Nightcrawler has never heard of does the crew think he is? Later in the series, he does meet some of them, and they help each other escape from Chagrin the Sorcerer.
I'm going to say the Simple, punchy monosyllable Bamf.
Ooh, you got the word, you got the letter right, but not the word.
A boglin, a boggart,
Boggy, yeah.
boggy. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
I don't know. Well, he does meet some Bamfs later on.
He does, yeah. But this is Boggy, and they call him the Great Boggy. As a bonus, this is not a question you need to be muddled or not, but what's the name of the ship captain?
Oh, well, I think it's Captain Kate Pride.
Long John McGurk.
Oh, okay. Wrong pirate ship.
On the Sky Rover Tai Javani. That's or Tai Javani. That's what he rides on.
Yeah, that's I have definitely read that miniseries, a Cockrum classic, but it's been a long time.
All right, we are down to our third and final here. Independent post 2000. I know Murd has talked about My Little Pony, and I've never heard it get used in a muddle. Could have missed it, so I'm trying it out. My girlfriend got me into MLP, and I've watched the entire Friendship is Magic TV series, and I've read a handful of the comics that she has. In 2018, IDW created a series called Ponyville Mysteries. In the first issue, the Cutie Mark Crusaders are working at a hospital and find out that someone has been stealing supplies, bandages, towels, cotton, and they take it upon themselves to find the culprit. The Crusaders accuse the janitor of being the thief, but realize she's innocent after another theft occurs. Conversation with Fluttershy provides the spark to finally crack the case. Who or what ends up being the actual thief?
Well, okay. Fluttershy is known for her activities with animals, so that leads me to think that maybe we're not talking about like what passes for human beings in the land of Equestria, i.e. a pony character. I'm going to go with the cartoon classic explanation and say that it was a pack rat.
Ooh. You, sir, have been muddled. The correct answer, birds that were stealing the supplies to make nests.
Okay, well, that's also a classic cartoon explanation.
Excellent.
All right. Well, curse you, Heller.
Well, you don't have to ship it that far, at least. So there's.
I could practically deliver it by hand, and I'm not going to do that. That would be weird. But I'm grateful that it's minimal postage. At least there's no international mailing going on.
Yes, indeed. So he will have that volume 1 of J. Michael Straczynski's Thor on his way. And Kevin, thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for the submission, for that matter. So good times.
Yep, your kind words warm the cockles, Kevin. I'm glad that we helped you find your way to a number of good reads over the years.
Yep, gentlemen, I'm going to steal it. I'm going to steer this in a direction that actually goes right off of that muddle, and that, of course, is the prize that was given away. As I got to read earlier today, J. Michael Straczynski's Captain America #1.
Ooh, I haven't read that yet.
Yeah. So. I know that I haven't really read a lot of Captain America lately. My favorite Captain America still to this day, I think, is Mark Waid's. It's highly regarded up there. I also enjoyed Remender's crazy ass, Kirby-esque adventures back in the day, with the John Romita Jr. art and a couple of other runs over the years. I've been a fan.
The Brubaker run, my friend. Of
course, the Brubaker run. Yeah. That one I almost even though considered to be Captain America. I consider that to be the Captain America family more than
fair enough.
But yes, you're absolutely right. Brubaker takes the cake. It may actually be my favorite first issue since Ed Brubaker's Captain America.
Wow, well, I can't wait to read it.
This grounds Captain America in a way that only someone of the caliber of J. Michael Straczynski could. He's returning to Marvel on this. I know he's done some, small issues here or there over the past couple of years, but this is his first real run he's done on a series since Spider-Man. So it's been quite some time. And Jesus Saez is his artist on this, and he brings again a very grounded, personable art style to the story. I'll see if I can get some internal pages here, other than this cover, just to show you what it looks like. But this begins with Captain America getting a visit from the super in his building, letting him know that everyone is about to be evicted. That after the events of a recent Captain America issue where some damage to the building took place, his landlord has decided to sell. And rather than take it lying down and accept this fate, Captain America decides to become a landlord. And in
say no more.
Yeah, he turns to Tony for an advance on his Avengers wages, which at least in the comic world they get paid. That's still a sticking point for that Sam Wilson and Winter Soldier run of the Disney Plus series. The fact that we found out that the Avengers don't get paid still kind of riles me a little bit. But he gets an advance on his salary from Tony. Tony gladly gives it to him, and he buys the building, makes it rent controlled, and decides, basically puts up a sign that says that there's going to be renovations, and that this you're not going anywhere. And that's where we begin. We then find out that this has been his building since he was a kid. That his mother lived here. That he then had to go out on the streets and do, as many small jobs as possible in order to pay his rent before he became Captain America in those 2 years in between her death and him becoming Captain America. We get a lot of small stories built in there, and then something potentially world-changing, as there's also going to be some sort of demon involved in this series. So like you get the really like down to earth stuff, and then you get some weird shit because it's J. Michael Straczynski and he does weird shit. But it's not in a bad way. It still all feels very Captain America. You can see the artwork that I have on the screen here. This is the very grounded and realistic artwork that Jesus Saez is bringing to this particular book, and I'm intrigued. I really want to see where this is going to go. So I can't wait to see what you think about it, Chris, when you do get a chance to read it. But
as soon as I get my shipment,
first, very, very good first start here for a Captain America title. And then the other book that I got to read in full was the first issue. I talked about it on the show that I couldn't wait to read it. I finally read Birds of Prey #1. That Kelly Thompson is spearheading, and this is just as good as I wanted it to be. It feels like Birds of Prey, but also it has its own unique personality to it, as where this is all setup issue here for what's going to be happening later on, but we're left with Black Canary getting a message that her sister Sin has been kidnapped, and she needs to get a group together in order to save her. And the group that's brought together is the group that's on the page right here. Love the redesign of Cassandra Cain's Batgirl outfit.
Great cover.
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. And this is our
dynamic.
This is our internal artist here as well, on this cover. And it's very old school Batman, like original Golden Age Batman with the ears and all that, but still distinctly feels like Batgirl, and I'm all for that. We got Harley Quinn in here, Barda, God, now I'm blanking on her name, from Wildcats. On the
Zealot?
Yes, that's Zealot there in the corner, finishing out the team. And she's also specifically been told not to let Barbara know about this quite yet, by the people who have Sin. Then, of course, we later find out who has Sin, and I will not give that away, but it's going to be a Ocean's 11-esque situation to get the team together and get her out safely, and then see where this Birds of Prey team goes from there. But this is just good old-fashioned Birds of Prey fun with a new coat of paint, and I am loving it. So
I just love the fact that they're using Sin as a character again. She got swept under the rug, regrettably, just like over a decade ago. But now she's back in Dinah's life, and that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for that matter, pretty much every character that's ever existed is back because, DC was like, what's a new 52? Everything happened. Everything happened. and I'm perfectly okay with that in the end anyway. So, yeah, really, really enjoyed what came out of that. And I had one more that I checked out, and that is they released an Infinite comic as the first issue of Jonathan Hickman's Gods. And I'm not sure if this is just the first issue or if this is just the Infinite comic version of it. But I read it in full, and this is going to be interesting because we're basically introduced with a whole bunch of characters that never existed but seem like they've existed for forever. That because Doctor Strange knows them, and here like we're presented with characters with fish faces and fox faces and all that, as we're presented also with a Babylon level event that is taking place as the old gods are trying to break through and mess with everything. And this was presented in, as you can see as I'm scrolling here, this was presented in a format, and I realize I'm not sharing my screen, but this was presented in an Infinite format on the Marvel Unlimited app. And I know there is also Gods #1 now available in stores, but really intrigued by what was going on here, and I have no idea where they're going to wind up going with this, but it seems like it's going to be the typical Jonathan Hickman, everything changes after this miniseries type of storytelling. Wonderful artwork by Valerio Schiti and Marte Garcia on this first issue here. As I'm trying to remember the name of the main character, but he's introduced as this character that's existed for like 1,000 years and has been essentially a herald for the gods, and his biggest competition is a group of beings that are all about the natural state of order, and his own wife winds up joining this natural order to throw a monkey wrench into things even further at one point during this here. So the first Gods Infinity comic is available for free on Marvel's website and also in the Marvel Infinite app. So if you do want to read it, that is where you can check it out. And the first issue of Gods is also available in stores right now as well. So check it out and see whether or not it's your type of storytelling. But it reminds me a lot of what Hickman was doing on X-Men in the early stages, because it's not overly complicated, but also it's incredibly intriguing, and I have no idea where he's actually going with this. So there's Gods #1 Infinite comic, and also available Gods #1 in actual comic book form now. That's what I've had time to read in recent times. So, Chris, what you got?
All right, brothers. I don't have as much as I normally do because school started this past month, so naturally life is just upheaval, and I'm getting more and more tired as each year passes. Hint, hint, hint. So, one thing I wanted to mention, Ian, this is unusual for me, but I stumbled upon some really exciting multimedia news. You probably know, but I wanted to bring it up because I'm just thrilled to pieces by this. Mm-hmm. So, my wife and I, one of our guilty pleasures, every year we watch Dancing with the Stars. Uh-huh. And my beloved Allison Hannigan is on it this year.
Yep, I've seen the commercials.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And, Willow. And I was just doing some background, and I didn't know that on October 12th, Audible is releasing an official new story with many of the original actors from the Buffyverse.
Really?
Yes. James Marsden as Spike, Charisma Carpenter, Cordelia, Anthony Stewart Head Giles, Emma Caulfield playing Anya, It's written by Amber Benson, who was Tara, and the writer Christopher Golden. I'm sure many of us know that name. He's written all kinds of books. I think he's written comics too. He's been involved in Buffy, and this is a story that takes place 10 years after the final episode of the final season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, huh.
Yeah. So I just stumbled upon this. I'm so excited. The premise apparently is Spike is trying to help a new Slayer find her way. So Sarah Michelle Gellar is not in it, but and neither is Allison Hannigan. But a lot of the other actors who are characters, like I think is Danny Strong in it? He might be in it too. I'm not sure, but there's a bunch of people in it who are all on the show, and it makes perfect sense because James Marsden is in his 60s. So how do they explain if they did an actual visual, how he's older when he's supposed to be a vampire? I'm sure they figure something out. But anyway, I think it's a wonderful.
Strong is going to be in it, by the way. I'm looking at the full.
Okay.
James Marsters, Charisma Carpenter, Anthony Head, Juliet Landau, Emma Caulfield Ford, Amber Benson, James Charles Leary, Danny Strong. They're all returning.
Yeah, but Juliet Landau is the villain. She's Drusilla.
Yep.
So I mean, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, besides Twin Peaks, is probably my favorite television show of all time. And to me, it's the greatest comic book that was ever on television.
Julia Landau is also the daughter of Martin Landau, by the way.
Yes, she is. Yes, who was a tremendous actor. So I'm really this is a homecoming for me as a fan, and I'm really looking forward to hearing this modern day radio drama in a sense. So, if there are any Buffy fans out there, look for that from Audible on. I think it's October 12th.
Excellent.
So, okay. Also wanted to point out, and Murd will appreciate this because he was the receptacle for this, so to speak. So, one of our listeners, Nathan Z. Tilwalk, I believe it was. Forgive me, sir, if I mispronounced your last name. Maybe he came into the Murd's Christmas store in Stone Harbor, and he dropped off The Death of the New Gods by Jim Starlin. Now, I have not read this yet. I haven't had a chance to, but Murd said that one of us would read it, and I'm going to read it. And by the next comic talk, I'm sure I'll have it done. And I can discuss it more detail. But I just want to thank Nathan for dropping this off, and for just being a listener of the show.
Also, as you mentioned it, Chris, since our last comic talk, we haven't discussed this lovely Murdo sojourn that we were able to take.
That's right. We haven't mentioned CGS by the Sea.
Yes, indeed. Yep. First time I was ever able to partake in CGS by the Sea, and Chris and I drove down on the Saturday to hang out with the whole crew, and it was a absolutely rollicking time of, as Chris would say, fellowship.
Yes. I especially enjoyed listeners' comments on our beach shot.
Yes.
I think my favorite was us being compared to a cover, like an album cover. But
is this a 90s? This is like a swimsuit special.
Man,
because the three of us on this call are the only ones that had the guts to actually go to the ocean and take a swim.
The temperature is wonderful.
It was. And it still is now, actually.
I'm sure it is.
I was in the ocean just earlier tonight because it's supposed to turn cold shortly. You have to take advantage while we can. But yeah, so the three of us went to the beach and we enjoyed it. But everybody else just stayed back and talked and listened to music. It was a full house. I think it's close to the largest number of people that I've ever hosted down here for this. The only people I invited who weren't able to come were Kevin, who's down there in Richmond doing whatever Kevin is doing. He's terribly mysterious. And Peter and Pants. He's usually one of the most reliable attendees of this thing, but he fell ill, so he wasn't able to join us. But in his place, Matt showed up.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Out of the clear blue sky, because Matt, for a guy who claims not to like surprises, has no qualms about inflicting them on others. He just kind of showed up on Saturday morning, and there he was. But fortunately, because Pants didn't come, we had a bed for him, and he stayed the weekend, and I was very glad to have him.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, our gatherings both at Murd's and then at my house in the winter, two of my highlights of the year.
Yes, the twin summits of the CGS royalty.
Not, of course, not forgetting Ms. Corsetto being a part of the bunch there, and the Obelises for that matter. So yes,
Danny and Bill, there they are in the foreground.
Redeemer.
And our friend Laura Fisher Esquire, practicing lawyer of Jersey City,
and a former employee of Wild Pig Comics.
Yes. Yep.
And there I am brandishing my beloved Shirley Temple.
But of course.
Oh, yes. Apparently at Quahog Seafood Shack, when they serve a Shirley Temple, they, they serve it with a little rubber squirt toy shark filled with grenadine and upended, like teeth down in the glass. So you can diffuse your own grenadine.
I have the shark in a place of honor in my dresser as we speak.
Yep, they.
Outstanding.
I don't know if you're really supposed to keep them, but Chris kept one, and I don't think they're going to begrudge you that, Chris.
No.
And by the way, Murd, I did finish the fudge, and every single one of them were absolutely delicious. So that was well worth the trip in and of itself. Was getting fudge from a place that's existed for over 100 years.
Oh yeah, and those chocolate covered pretzels I got, sensational. Holy mackerel!
Yes, absolutely.
All courtesy of Douglas Fudge, who have locations throughout the southernmost Jersey shore points, Cape May, Wildwood, etc. Yeah. We didn't go to our neighbor. There's another place in town called the Original Fudge Kitchen, which is right next to our Christmas shop. We didn't go there, probably just as well. Their fudge is just the tiniest bit better, I think, by reputation at least, than Douglas's, but everything else, I mean, Douglas is probably the superior shop. So.
Plus, I love their logo, the Scotty on the packaging is absolutely delightful.
Yep, right out of your Monopoly board.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. And for that matter, I've already mailed, and they've been delivered, and they were delivered in one piece. The bluey and baseball ornaments that I purchased from the barn were mailed to Martha's cousins in one piece. So mission accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And thank you guys for patronizing the shop while you were in town.
Oh,
it wasn't necessary,
Murd,
but we appreciate it.
Oh, come on.
Looking forward to trimming the tree with all the new Murd ornaments I got.
Americana.
Yes. So anyway, Nathan, thanks again for dropping the book off to Murd, and I'll definitely have a reaction to it for our next comic talk.
Yep, and I'll have a reaction to it whenever the individual issues make their way to the top of my pile.
Fantastic.
All right, let's see what else. You know what? Before I dive into my smaller pile, I should mention, as on a personal note, because it's a source of great satisfaction and joy to me. This month is my 10th anniversary as a full-time member of the CGS cast.
Nicely done, sir.
Yes. So the show is easily one of the great joys of my life. When I do this show, I don't think about anything in normal life that can be, disheartening or exhausting. As I say, a tonic for the spirit. And brothers, I love you all, and this is easily one of the delights of my life the past 10 years.
Amen to that. I've never heard anybody compliment me more in my life, man.
Well, it's only
how many men have called
sir?
you sexy more often than
nobody other than Chris. Nobody other than Chris.
Only when it's due, and it's due all the time for you, honey. So let's say another decade. Let's hope.
You're here.
So
yep.
I drink to that.
All right, what I got. So again, not as many this month because I just didn't have as much time, but this is an Ian recommendation, and Levy Poo never lets me down. Scarlet Witch Volume 1. So this is the Steve Orlando, which right there, that's a good indication it's going to be something worth reading.
You bet.
Especially something involving magic, the supernatural, so forth. Art by Sarah Pichelli, Russell Dowderman, Carlos Nieto. I read issues 1 through 5. I didn't read the annual yet that's in the back, but Ian, superb.
Oh, it's so good.
Really good. I've read many Wanda stories throughout my life, but and I know there's been other solo series I've not read. I think, did James Robinson do one? I want to say he did.
He did. That's where the whole Wanda and Pietro aren't really Magneto's kids and they're part Inhuman or something. That's where that whole business came from.
So what was great about this story, and I won't spoil too much of those who haven't read it, is that it really reckons with her whole history and really explores the cost to her of what she's been through, but at the same time is really showing her as a survivor and that she's trying to start a new life. She has, a magic shop, and as Ian mentioned, it's very reminiscent of the magic shop in Buffy that Giles ran. There's a great new supporting character who's working for her, has her own sort of secrets. And the premise, as Ian mentioned in the past, was
supporting character from the movies, we might add.
That's right. That's
what's her face from the Thor movies.
Oh, bloody hell. Kat Denning is the actor's name.
Yeah. Well, okay. It'll come to me. Translation, I'll look it up. But yes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you reminded me of that. But the fact that you could
is it Darla? Is that her name? I think that sounds right.
Well, Darcy is the name of the character in
Darcy.
the movies.
Thank you, Darcy. Then there we go. Then that's her name, Darcy.
So and you have like you open a door, and if you like you're really on your last leg, you come through the door, this magic door, Wanda will help you.
Yep.
So it's someone who's had, certainly had her second chances, trying to give other people second chances, and I was very charmed by it, no pun intended. Just great to see a character as complicated as the Scarlet Witch really get her due by creators who really understand the character. Yeah. So I think the series is ending, is it not, Ian? I want to say it is.
So it's ending, but from what I've heard, there's going to be some sort of continuation, and then there's going to be a volume 2. So that's the current path of it. So wherever it's going to end, it's going to have a reason to end.
Great. So I'll read this in trade. So I assume there'll be a second trade coming, because I think the series is going to 12 issues or something like that.
I think it might be 11 actually. But
okay, so there'll be another trade coming. So I'll look forward to discussing that down the road. Then I tried again a character I've loved that I haven't read lately, which is Thor. So I got the new Al Ewing, the Immortal Thor #1. Stunning, of course, Alex Ross cover. Great to see, by the way, in these months at Marvels, they have a wonderful tribute to John Romita in them, which is fantastic. But this issue, the artwork is stunning. Let me find who the artist was. I'm brain farting. Forgive me. Oh, Martin. I'm going to butcher this name. I apologize. Kokolo. It's beautiful. It's got that epic feel. Like, here's a great. Like, look at this. Right, there's Thor descending from the heavens.
Very nice.
And it's just beautifully rendered, old school Thor. All the Warriors 3 are there. Loki's making mischief. I mean, look at this page, like the Rainbow Bridge. Like, this is beautiful stuff.
Yes, it is.
So, and it's Al Ewing, who's a writer I've really admired over the past several years. And one thing I really enjoyed, he has an essay in the back where he talks about his love of the character and how he first experienced him. And he talked about in his essay how much he always liked it in older stories when Thor smiled, and sort of the joy of his experience being Thor. And he really returns to that in this book, and there's great shots of Thor, traversing the skyways with Mjolnir and just smiling. It's a beautifully told first issue. So I really enjoyed that thoroughly. So again, Thor is a character that I've loved my entire life, and I've read not every Thor story, but most of them. Although I haven't read the last volume or two, but great to come home to that. And Ian's got a great example of the artwork in the issue.
Yep.
Okay. This unfortunately was a disappointment to me. This is Jean Grey #1. And again, Louis Simons has a wonderful place in the pantheon of comic creators as an editor and a writer. So nothing against her per se. I mean, I really respect her work. It's just this book is all about Jean Grey and her reflecting on the past when the Brian Michael Bendis X-Men came back from the past to the present to try to rectify things, which were excellent stories. And it's her reckoning with that, and really it's about Jean deciding to essentially use her powers to try to right things, and as we all know, that never goes anywhere good. But it's really the Jean Grey who came from that past, essentially. And you have the Phoenix come into it. I think what I struggled with was that I kind of feel like I've read this story before. And also, to be fair, as we discussed, I just read Dark Phoenix Saga again just recently, which to me is one of the all-time greats. And this just kind of left me feeling a little flat. She's manifesting the Phoenix power. Well told. I mean, artwork is strong. There's nothing in terms of production. It's just the story just didn't really click with me. Other fans might enjoy it more. Okay, a couple more things. Just a few things. The latest back issue was fantastic. Look at that Poland cover. So it's all about. It's focusing on. You'll love this, especially Murd. Daredevil's Bronze Age era. So, which we all know is quite wacky. Go to our Daredevil in the Bronze Age spotlight from some years back. So they give you a great history on that really eclectic period from Daredevil's history, all the different villains, the creators are involved, Roy Thomas, Jerry Conway, Steve Gerber, Gene Colan, the Black Widow. It's good stuff. And they do a really great job just reflecting on all the different stories as only back issue can. The supporting characters, some of the wacky villains from that era, of course. They talk about Torpedo and actually, Torpedo gets a whole 2-page spread for him.
Do we have Angar the Screamer and Ramrod and?
I haven't read everything in the magazine yet. I'm going to assume so.
Better be Damon Dran, the indestructible man.
Yeah, fantastic. I knew you'd appreciate that, Murd. So that's this again. Back issue just has no peer when it comes to such a loving tribute to these characters in this era. There's even here a 1-page analysis of comparing DC's Scarecrow to Mr. Fear, the classic Daredevil villain. Excellent stuff. And then they have I haven't finished the whole magazine. The great article on Bronze Age Challenges of the Unknown, Super Team Family. It just so good. There's an interview with Jeff Loeb on Challenges of the Unknown and Daredevil Yellow. Of course, remember the late great Tim Sale. Just a wonderful issue of Back Issue. So can't recommend that enough. Again, tomorrow's last two things I mentioned are things I've mentioned before, but I'm going to keep mentioning them because they're just that good. So they just finished up the Star Trek Day of Blood crossover that I've been raving about on this program for the past couple months. Utterly satisfying conclusion. Again, won't spoil anything, but if you're a Star Trek fan, especially if you love and miss Deep Space Nine, don't think. Get out there, get those issues of Day of Blood. Okay. It's crossover with the Star Trek flagship title by IDW and the Star Trek Defiant title. Again, the writers Colin Kelly, Jackson Lansing, who are probably going to appear in my nomination list this year. And again, Christopher Cantwell's writing Defiant, which enough said there. So there's that. Oh, look at that cover.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. Yep. And then finally, because I'm going to keep reading out of this book because that's how good it is. This is one of the best comics being published today. For me, pound for pound. Conan the Barbarian. This is issue 3. Jim Zub on the writing. Rob De La Torre doing some of the most stunning artwork I've seen in a comic in quite some time. And he's just channeling like the great Conan artists of the past, especially John Buscema. This is one of the most exciting books out there right now. And I mean, if you know the history of Conan and you've read Conan comics in the past, you'll especially enjoy it because it's such a wonderful tribute to what's best about. Look at that page. What's best about Conan, but the writing is so strong. The command of the characters and De La Torre's storytelling chops and his artwork is just absolutely gorgeous. This book's going to be all over my 2023 nomination list. It is. This is the pinnacle for me of good comics right now. So that's what I got this time, folks.
All right.
Excellent. I have a couple of quick things to point out. One, if you haven't checked out on YouTube yet, there's a series that's been coming out the past couple of weeks called Star Trek Very Short Treks that are available on YouTube on the official Star Trek channel. And they're done mostly in the style of the original Star Trek animated series, only they're incredibly zany and ridiculous. There's an episode from last week where it's essentially a holodeck inside a holodeck inside a holodeck inside a holodeck. You go through like the different people, turning off the holodeck, and you'll go from like Riker going into similar to one of the last episodes of Enterprise, like looking at the Enterprise crew, and then the Deep Space Nine guys turn off the simulation of Riker looking at that, and the lower decks guys come in, and then everybody else comes. It's brilliant, and they're all like 5 or 6 minutes long. And
what's it called again?
It's called Very Short Treks.
Okay.
And it's available on the Star Trek YouTube channel. So they're very easy to find. You don't need a Paramount Plus subscription to watch them. However, I will say that Lower Decks this season has been absolutely amazing, and it continues to be one of my favorite Star Trek shows running right now. And please catch up on that if you have the opportunity. It is well worth your time. I will also point out that after this episode airs, that we're recording right now, I will be putting out I don't know how many this mini episode is going to be, but it's essentially going to be a comic timing / Comic Geek Speak episode. As this past weekend, I was able to attend my first ever toy fair.
Terrific.
Yep, and I'm going to be recording with Chris Naudis, who also attended it with me. So our thoughts on the show, thoughts on upcoming shows, as it was announced as after being in New York for over 100 years.
Wow.
Toy Fair is going to be moving. Their last year running in New York will be 2025, and then after that they're going to be moving to New Orleans and then potentially Las Vegas. So major shift in the toy world with that change, and I'll be talking about that in a ton.
I'm sure Shane look forward to that discussion.
Absolutely, yep. So you can find that on the feed when it does come out. And there'll also be another episode dropping eventually that I'm sure you all will enjoy. That I'm going to leave in the ether. But everybody on this call knows what it is. So let's just worry about that when it happens. But nonetheless, that's about it. I think bolt shot at this point, gentlemen.
Yep, bolt is shot.
Yep, terrific. And once again, thank you to Sean Chen for joining us. That was an absolute pleasure and
it was wonderful.
And indeed. And thank you once again, patreon.com/comicgeekspeak for continuing to support the show in any way that you do so. And please, as we just mentioned, Sean, do support his Kickstarter. Once again, the name of that Kickstarter is EVERMIND, a sci-fi saga by Daniel Wu and Sean Chen. If you search EVERMIND on Kickstarter, it will come up. Or honestly, just search EVERMIND and Sean Chen on Google, and it'll be the first search result that winds up coming up anyway. So please do check that out if you have not already done so. And with that, we'll cue up the music, as tonight, someone other than Shane gets to be Shane. And that person's name is Murd. So if he's ready.
Which he isn't.
All right.
Yeah, sorry.
It's fine.
You caught me.
It's perfectly fine. I think I also know how to do it, so I can probably do it. So I will do it from memory. It's going to work. It's going to be great. And
I love when Ian goes into his boy chick persona here, by the way.
Try the veal. All right, here we go. All right. Well, the number to call Comic Geek Speak is 267-702-6642. You can find us at facebook.com/Comic Geek Speak or at the Comic Geek Speak supergroup if you would like to join in on the conversation. The comicforums.vanillacommunity.com still exist if you want to head over there. Twitter.com/Comic Geek Speak is the Twitter. That's right, Twitter. It's still called Twitter. Do check it out there. We also have a Blue Sky account now. So if you want to follow us on there, we'll be simulcasting all the stuff that would be on Twitter on Blue Sky, plus some other stuff on there as well. So find us once again as Comic Geek Speak on Blue Sky. YouTube.com/Comic Geek Speak for all of the videos that we are releasing, as well as audio versions of other episodes. And of course, once again, thank you for everyone who donates to the show. We really do appreciate it and could not do it without you. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time. Shockingly, when you listen to the show as many times as I did before I was even a host, sometimes you actually remember how to do the ending.